Thanks for joining us for another episode of DPC Radio. This episode was recorded live in Amsterdam at the Dutch PHP Conference 2012. For more information about the Dutch PHP Conference, visit our website, phpconference.nl.
Good morning. All right. Slides are online. My mic fell. Laura, too. Wow. Sorry about that. Okay, better. All right. Slides are online in their usual place. Twitter ID is there if you want to follow. Now, I usually start by talking about stuff that happened 17 years ago in PHP. A little different this time. Like a year before I started working on PHP, that happened. Where Denmark won Euro 92. They played the Netherlands in the semifinals. Beat them, of course. And beat Germany in the finals. So keep that in mind tonight. Unfortunately, I'll be on the plane. So, PHP has grown up a lot, and it is pretty much everywhere these days. I spent 7+ years at Yahoo, and obviously PHP is all over Yahoo, but it's also infected many, many other places. Yahoo's big in Asia, and a lot of sites basically took Yahoo's lead, and then engineers came out of Yahoo Asia and started all kinds of other companies as well. So most of the large Asian websites are in PHP. You can see some of the examples there. Weibo is like the Chinese Twitter. Photo sharing sites tend to be in PHP, Flickr, SmugMug, PhotoBucket, and others. Discussion sites, blog sites. Most of the big ones that we read tend to be in PHP as well. Media sites as well. Wikipedia, obviously. Most forum sites. There are very few well-known or popular forum packages that aren't written in PHP. Facebook, of course, Zynga. And then a few really interesting ones as well. Etsy is my current company. Government sites. And Sahana. And I want to talk a little bit more about this last one. So, does anybody recognize this guy? Very good. Arthur C. Clarke, yes. So I was in Sri Lanka in 2007, 2008, right after the big tsunami hit Sri Lanka. And I ran across a bunch of kids that were working on this project called Sahana. And Sahana is a disaster recovery package, or sort of disaster recovery management in a box. It manages relief efforts, so relief comes in after a disaster. You have to figure out what provisions you received and where it should go. So there's software to do that. There's software to handle missing people. So you find someone, you enter them, and family members can go and search for these missing family members, and you keep track of where people are. And all aspects of disaster relief management is handled by this package. And it's been used now in many, or most of the recent disasters. There's a list of them there. And this is one of these things that before I saw this, I was sort of stuck in building PHP and then stuck in this world of technology. And you see occasional glimpses of interesting things being done with the tools that you build. But this is one of those tools that is bigger than everything that we do. I mean, tools that save lives. You don't really get beyond that, right? There's a nice quote there from someone in the Philippines. And lately, after doing this for 20+ years now, I've been looking for a bit more motivation than simply building cool tools and building cool technology. And this idea that we should work on things that matter. It's something that I don't think we do very well currently. I think we work on a lot of things that don't matter. And we find that we think we're really smart. We're much smarter than all the civilians out there. I mean, we can handle technology. We are internet jockeys. We know how the web works. We know all these things. We build all these cool things. But do they matter? I mean, are we leaving the world a better place for our kids with some of these things that we build? I mean, how much time is spent on stuff like that, right? Does it matter? And I realize what matters is a very subjective thing. But at the same time, there are some things that even subjectively it's hard to justify that it actually matters. And maybe we can be spending our time on better things. And not just technology folks, also investors, VCs in technology. I mean, what are they investing in? Are they investing in things that in the longer term will leave the world a better place? I'm not so sure. And it's something I would love to see people think about a little bit more. So other things, do they matter? I don't know. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of comments on somebody's nails, right? And it's been shared, like 2,000 times, but it's been like repinned 17,000 times. And I mean, I can understand people that reshare this and that they don't work on things that matter. That's fine. But there are also people that build these tools that sort of cater to this crowd, and that's okay as well. But there just aren't enough people that work on things that matter, I think. Does that matter? Does Instagram matter at all? I mean, slightly stylistic photos, easily shareable on your phone. Okay. I'm not sure that helps the world in any way whatsoever. Kiva, does that matter? That seems more along the right lines to me. There had been some criticism recently of Kiva and in the way the whole microloans work, because people don't really understand how microloans work. But on the whole, I think sites like Kiva do matter. But there aren't enough of these sites around, and I would love to see more thinking along these lines. And it doesn't have to be on a grand scale like Kiva. It could be local as well. It could be building stuff for your local community, for your people around you, for your schools, for your kids, whatever. But I think in general that we're running out of things that we can just sort of sit and solve at our keyboards. The tools that we build are part of the solution, but I think we need to get out there and look around a little bit and see how do we apply our tools. And things that we can solve just sitting in our room at our keyboard, that's actually the easy part. I've been delving out a little bit beyond into larger problems these days, and I can tell you when we come to the part where we need a technology piece that's missing, that's the trivial part. Because that you can just sit by yourself, or you can hire a couple of guys, and 2 months later you've built it. That's easy. Dealing with governments, dealing with politicians, dealing with large social change things in developing countries, now that's difficult. And yes, there are times when I need a technology piece. I need a mobile app, for example, in places where there's no internet connectivity and things along those lines. But again, I'm sort of relieved when I hit a technological obstacle, because those ones you can just plow right through. It's the other ones that are really, really hard, and I think that scares people. I think people see problems that they can't solve just with their keyboard, and they shy away from them. But like I said, how many of these problems that we can just solve sitting in front of our keyboard are there left? I don't think there are that many. So if we really are as smart as we think we are, I really hope that we can get beyond that and get out there and look at the bigger problems and apply our technology know-how. because it's going to be part of it. But it's not the whole thing. So, this is a PHP conference, and I am the PHP guy, I suppose, although I write a hell of a lot more C than PHP, to be honest. So why is PHP part of this? Why has PHP gotten this much traction? And you saw from all the sites in the original little slideshow there that PHP is everywhere these days. It's on about 1/3 of every domain in the world. If you just randomly type in a domain, it'll be 1/3 of them will be PHP. In terms of actual click traffic, it's hard to tell, but it's probably way over 50%. Most porn sites are in PHP, which takes you to the 50% right there. And then you have got every Facebook click and every photo click and lots and lots of sites out there. So I would guess it's in the 60-70% of all clicks on the web are PHP driven, which is pretty crazy, actually. So why? I mean, one of the reasons is that PHP isn't just the language. It's more part of an overall ecosystem of tools that work well together. The original one was LAMP. We've been working pretty hard on getting PHP FPM and Nginx up to that same level. The database support has always been strong right from the very beginning. And we've also always focused on shared hosting providers. Well, I wouldn't say focus, but at least we've addressed them, and we have come up with solutions and an architecture that ISPs find feasible to deploy to lots of users. So historically, that's why PHP has gotten this kind of traction, because the whole ecosystem worked together. All the examples, documentation showed that how to actually solve the web problem, and it was available at all the ISPs. The other part of it is scalability. And there's the two parts to that. There is scaling up, which tends to be kind of obvious to us as technologists. Not always easy, but we look at a scaling problem and we see, okay, we can see the problem. We know we need to get rid of this lock, for example, or we need to get more concurrency somewhere. And that's kind of easy. It's one of these technology problems that you can plow through systematically and fix. But the hard part about scaling, I think, is scaling down. There's very, very little software in the world that teenagers sit and play with on the weekend that also runs some of the most valuable companies in the world. The exact same version of the software, essentially, that scales down to kids playing on the weekends all the way up to sites like Yahoo and Facebook, right? And that gets really, really hard. And it's impossible to please everybody in a spectrum that big, which is why you see a lot of criticism as well about PHP. There's a lot of things in PHP. People say, well, the global namespace is just too busy. There's just too much stuff in the global namespace. But at the same time, beginners love the fact that all this stuff is available to them because they don't know how to install things. They don't know how to figure out which version of that goes with this version of that. And many other environments, you have dependency hell when you're trying to get something to talk to something else. And all these things are just built into PHP, and that's why they're there. So, where are we today? PHP 5.4 came out a couple of months ago. Lots of interesting new features. We have a lot of performance improvements. Memory management is a lot better. Some projects report about 50% reduction in memory usage for their scripts under 5.4. Performance-wise, you'll probably get 5 to 15% better performance out of 5.4, depending on what you're doing. If you're doing a lot of one of these things you see listed, you'll get a lot of performance out of it. Davy Shafiq has a talk on 5.4 features today at 11:45, I believe. It's down here, where he'll go over all of these in detail. Not to steal any of his thunder, but I realize not all of you go to one track, and you shouldn't. So just a quick overview. We have a built-in web server. We have traits, new feature in 5.4. We have a short array syntax, so you don't need to use the array keyword now to define arrays. Function array dereferencing, meaning if a function returns an array, you can dereference it right on the function call. Better support for $this inside closures. Short array or short output syntax is now always available, regardless of the setting in the short tags. We have a session object. Create the session object with the 6 methods that you can pass to set session safe handler. Callable type hint. Much better support for Asian characters in special chars and entities. Default char set, multibyte and some JSON improvements as well, and lots of other things too. But David will go into all of these in detail and about 10 more, I think. So that's 5.4. You really should be looking at it. Hopefully you're all on 5.3 if you're using PHP. If you're not on 5.3, then it might be a little bit hairy going to 5.4, so I would suggest getting on 5.3 right away. It's also much faster than previous versions. So if you're still on 5.0, 5.1, 5.2, get on 5.3 soon. So you're ready for 5.4. 5.3 was released, 6 years ago? So there's really no excuse not to be on it. Some other things that I've been playing with a little bit. With Node.js gaining some traction, I started to wonder, why aren't more people doing, they're switching languages in order to do event-driven things and non-blocking I.O., but you can actually do that pretty well in PHP as well. Not all I.O. is non-blocking, obviously, but you can still do the higher level Dynamo-style things in PHP very easily. So this was an original thing that I posted, wrote in some airport somewhere, showing how you could build a little event-driven server. So this one sits and listens on a port, a 0MQ port for 10 messages, then it exits. And it's a little hairy, this code. If you don't know libevent, it gets a little nasty. So, but with this, I was trying to encourage someone to take this further. And someone did. Someone with a bit of a not completely serious takeoff of Node.js. They made a node.php.org. But the actual software that they wrote, this thing called React, is really cool. So here's a piece of code that basically is just a simple web server. You can see it has favicon support. It grabs other requests as well. Here's another smaller version that just sends 200 back on everything, but it sits and listens to 10 different ports at the same time. You can see 80,000, 8009. And it's really, really fast. And then concurrency goes into thousands of concurrent requests pretty easily. You can also use it for stuff like doing stuff in parallel from PHP. You could use curl multi here for that as well, but this is the Node PHP way of doing concurrent downloads in this case. So if you're interested in that kind of things, have a look at nodephp.org and give him a hand. He could use some help. The thing I've been playing with is machine learning. So SVM, support vector machines, are really cool, I think. Basically, if you're trying to predict something based on a bunch of vectors coming in, and you want to teach a machine how to, or you want to train a machine so that it can predict future events based on those vectors, you can do it in about 3 lines of PHP code. You feed it the vectors and the decisions that were made, maybe manually. Or the decisions that you have this, basically a history of past decisions and the vectors that you had for those decisions. And then future ones you can predict just by calling model predict and feeding it an array of those vectors. So it could be fraud, it could be spam, it could be almost anything where you're trying to make a decision based on a whole bunch of input. As long as you have decent vectors, it's trivial to apply an SVM type of approach here, and it's much stronger than something simple like Bayes, for example. SVM is kind of a generational leap on top of the old Bayes stuff that we were using 8-9 years ago. And basically the way it works is just, it tries to find the best division between things. So in 2 dimensions there, you can see if you have the red and the blue dots, it's kind of hard to see where the dividing line is, and you get another dot somewhere in that plane, who knows, right? But if you then bring it into 3 dimensions, suddenly you can see that all the blue dots are actually up there and all the red dots are down there, and you can put this dividing plane between them. And so SVM is like that, but in n dimensions. So take it into 10, 12, 100 dimensions, right? And you get this hyperplane that divides all these events. And it does all the cool math for you, and it's very, very easy to use. So what else are we working on? You saw some improvements in Unicode in 5.4. It's a small step towards better Unicode. We still need to think a lot about how we're going to handle Unicode in the future. I'm still hoping for some kind of magical Unicode library that shows up that's UTF-8 based, small and quick. We don't have that yet. We have non-UTF-8 based, huge, monolithic libraries that are much, much bigger than all of PHP. And they tend to be very complicated. And also, Unicode is a very difficult problem because nobody really has a Unicode problem. You saw the list of all the Asian sites. They're using PHP just fine, right? And we're using PHP just fine in Western countries. It's only the larger companies that need a single code base to work in all the different environments that really care about Unicode strongly. Others can sort of limp along and they're fine. So it's hard to get people motivated, especially when you tell them that, well, it's going to use 3-4 times as much memory and it'll probably be twice as slow. Who's going to upgrade to that version, right? So it's a really tough problem, but we're still working on it and thinking about it. Where else are we going? Kind of depends on the web. People always ask me, so what's the future for PHP? Well, what's the future for the web? We've always followed along and implemented things that the web needed, and we'll continue to do so. Language trends, we trail well behind really modern language trends, but we do get there eventually with things like traits and other things. PHP was never a religion for language things. It was more a tool to get stuff done. We don't really want to blaze any language trends here with weird features that nobody's ever heard of. But we will get there. And what we really need is some young blood. I'm getting old and tired and bored of some of this stuff. We need some younger folks with some more energy, and that's what I want to focus on a little bit. Contributing to PHP. So there's some very, very easy things you can do. And everyone in this room, if you're using PHP, you can at the very least help us test RCs, right? So go to QA.php.net, download the latest release candidate tarball, and just type in configure. And if you configure it with your common configuration flags, it'll be more useful both to you and to us, right? So that you test some of the other extensions. You can check your current configuration simply by doing php-i and grep configure. That'll see what your currently installed PHP, what the configure line was for that. You can make a little script with all those flags and run it. Right. That means that you're then configuring this release candidate with the same configuration that you're interested in. And then you simply run your configure with your flags, right? Make test. That's it. Takes a little while to run make test, but pop it up in the window and go off doing something else, right? When it comes back, you'll get something like this with a summary of failed tests and things. Some warning tests as well. And you can then automatically send that to us. And the QA site has a database of all the past ones as well. So you can go in and you can look at other people's test results for the whatever version, and you can go in and see how various tests have failed for other people. Let's see here. Some more here. Slow. Anyway, here we go. So here we can see that this test, for example, has failed 8,130 times in 9 different ways. Right, so this is probably not a very good test. So some of these tests need some help. And it's not that hard. if a test fails for you, you'll see a line something like this in the test failure output in the summary, where it tells you exactly the file name of the test case. So that's the file name there. If you then list all the files with the same name, but all the different extensions of that name, you'll see that it creates a diff file, an expected, log, out, PHP, PHPT, and shell. So PHPT is the original test case, and these other ones got created. The .sh file is the one that you can run in order to run the test under the same conditions as the test program ran it. The diff tells you the diff between the expected and the actual output. And in this case, this is some new MySQL warning, apparently, that this test spits out. It was expecting 16 and 35. It wasn't expecting this 20. So here's where, if you know a little bit about MySQL, maybe the newer versions of MySQL have this extra warning or something, who knows. Then you need to go in and fix the test and submit a patch to us. And one thing people don't realize is you also don't have to run all the tests again and sit there waiting for an hour for the test cases to work. You can put in make test and tests equals ext pdo MySQL to just run that small section of tests. And then you can iterate through and check to see if your test now passes in the real make tests scenario. So that doesn't take very much to help us with that. You can also help us write new tests. So we have a nice site called gcov that many people also don't know about. On gcov, you can go in, you can see what the test coverage looks like. So here you can see all the various extensions. Some of them could use some help, like Postgres, for example. We only have 61% coverage, and if you click on the file name, you can go in and see where we need better test coverage. So all the blue here is covered and the red is not. So you need to be able to read a little bit of C code here to try to see which conditions are not being exercised by tests, and then try to write a test case that hits some of these conditions. So here, well, there's not much to test on just the return, but some of these other ones, here you can see if you have 0 arguments, then this gets created, right? So it's just a matter of calling this function with 0 arguments in your test case and testing the output to get coverage there. And the tests themselves are really, really easy. This is something I wrote 15 plus years ago, where basically you have the name of the test, you have the body of the test, and then you have the expected output. That's a full PHP test case. It's not unit testing with mock objects and all this complicated stuff that's where the test is harder to write than the actual code. This is just straight, this is what we expect, this is the code, and that's it. You can do conditional tests as well. So you can put a skip if block in there. We have a little block of PHP that defines when this test should be skipped. So any PHP code that outputs skip will cause the test framework to skip that test. You can also have post variables, get variables, things like that. There are many other sections as well for doing things, but for the most part, you don't need them. But there are times when you need other things like cookie data. And the expected output, sometimes you need to have a regex or like a sprintf type thing where you say, okay, this is resort number 12. It's not always going to be 12, so you can put %d in there. But other than that, it's really, really easy to write tests. So please help us out with that. Also, please file useful bug reports. We've had a lot of non-useful bug reports. It's a little hard to read this one, but here's someone complaining about the fact that his Farmville IQ tests didn't work or something, and he lost lots of Farmville coins, and somehow that's a PHP bug. Don't do that. Yeah. So a good response at the bottom here. Then we have Andre's famous "Go to Hell" response as well. Someone complaining that PHP 5.3 includes goto, and it really shouldn't, and that's a bug. And What else do we have? We have some. Oh yeah. This is also another way to submit bugs, especially if you start off by swearing at the developers and how badly the program sucks and everything. And I don't know. It's some guy who can't make PHP and MySQL talk to each other because somehow PHP and MySQL really don't work together, according to him. But his problem may also be that he's on Windows XP Pro. Yeah. And another good response from Andre. So, we don't always have the most polite responses to bugs. Well, we also get a lot of bug reports. We're up to like 62,000 bug reports now, and it's hard to really take all of them seriously. So here's some guy complaining about a change to number format. And a bug report isn't actually that bad, but he just gets more and more annoying. If you go and check the slide and read the comments. And I told him how to fix it. I said it's going to take him months to fix his code, which is stupid because it wouldn't. And then at some point he asked to escalate to somebody else. And it was me dealing with this one, right? And so here he says, please escalate this to someone who can answer this question. I'm like, and yeah, okay. I would really love it if I had someone to escalate some of this stuff to. And then also you get stuff like this, right? From some PhD computer science guy somewhere. This is probably my favorite fan mail I've ever gotten. Well, and he also doesn't know what his name is, right? It's either Damian Taylor or it's Walter Bagdasarian. I don't know. Whatever. I tried to find both of these guys, and they didn't seem to exist, so he obviously didn't want to sign his real name to it. Which isn't that surprising. All right, so anyway, that's more just an example of sort of our frustration sometimes, and this is really why we get a little bit frustrated. So we're at 61,923 reported bugs. Out of those, 20,000, almost 21,000 were not a bug. If you add in the duplicates, we have over 21,000 were not actually bugs. So that's a third of all reported bugs to PHP weren't bugs. It takes a lot of our time processing these things, and often it's not obvious. They're not all as silly as the ones I just showed you. They're more complicated with big, long scripts and things in there. And it takes a while to go through and figure out if there's something real there. And we could really use some help in going through these. If you don't know where to start on that, you can go to PHP or bugs.php.net/random, or just click on the random link here, and you'll get a random open bug. Personally, when I see Win32, I hit the link again. So here's one. 2011, relatively recent, CentOS. Okay, so this is one that might actually read through, but there has been some responses in there, but we still haven't resolved whatever the problem is. And a lot of these, maybe they have been fixed in more recent versions, and these are the kinds of things that we could use some help in just going through and just verifying again what that bug is and trying it in most recent version. Or maybe just adding a little bit of info to it that will help somebody figure out how to close that particular bug. So yeah, that's the link to go directly there. php.net/random. We'll get you there. We could also use some help on the documentation side. We have a really cool tool called edit.php.net. If you go to any manual page, Why didn't it give me? Oh, let's go. Dutch mirror, faster, very good. So any manual page here, you'll see there's an edit link now. And the edit link will take you directly into this really cool edit tool, where you don't need to know a lot about DocBook XML anymore. You can log in anonymously, or you can sign in as you. I have a php.net account, so I can sign in as me. And you end up with something that looks like this. 1 second. Oh, it lied. I hate that. Okay, too slow. But basically what you get is an editor window where you see the DocBook XML itself. And it should be mostly obvious, and especially if you're just fixing a typo or a problem in one of the examples. Did I get my password wrong? Didn't think so. And you can make the change and save it. And then over on the left, you'll see there's a list of your changes and things. And you can right-click and say Submit Patch on your change. And that'll submit a patch with the actual change to the documentation team. And they can very, very easily incorporate that into the documentation. All right, this isn't working right now. But it may be the slow connection, yeah. The other place where we could use some help is in user notes. Oops, I should log in. So this is a much worse interface. So the user notes we're talking about, these are the ones that are on the manual pages. Right? Or let's go to the more interesting one, trades. So these are all the user notes that you see at the bottom down here, right? So when you're logged in, I thought I was logged in. If you have a php.net account and you're logged in, then there'll be little edit widgets next to it there. And then you can go directly into the editor, but the editor you end up in is in here. And you end up in one of these notes, for example. And in here you can then delete them, edit them, whatever. Just go through them and get rid of stuff that doesn't apply to the manual. There's a mailing list as well where all new notes get sent to. So if you really are interested in helping out with that, ask us about it and we'll get you on the mailing list and get you started with that. All right. And also we have a wiki, right, for RFCs, for new features in PHP. So if you want to go beyond things and you want to actually help improve PHP, then if it's beyond just simple bug fixes, if it's larger features, you can go through the existing RFCs and see how they're written, especially go through some of the more successful ones and see how they were done and do that. And usually you need a very good explanation of your feature, some pros and cons, discuss it on the mailing list, integrate that feedback that you get back into your RFC, put together a decent patch, and eventually a year or 2, 3 years later, it'll go into PHP, depending on how complicated it is. Traits took 3 years in this process to get in, but traits was big and complicated. A lot of features can go in faster than that. Although this site isn't very fast from here. We'll give up on that. So, I wanted to leave a few minutes for questions. I have a little bit of time. Okay. So like I said, please get onto 5.3 if you aren't already. Test your code in 5.4, run the QA RC tests, run your code on 5.4. We do still, in APC, there are still a few edge cases that I haven't cleaned up yet. It's another place that we could use some help. APC is kind of scary, just because it's complicated. You have many processes all talking to this one shared memory segment. And it's essentially multi-threaded programming that gets very hairy. But if you are a really strong C guy and want a real challenge, then please help me out with APC. And don't forget that we're doing this stuff for a reason, right? We're building interesting things for real people. We're not just playing with technology for the sake of playing with technology, or we shouldn't be. We should be doing this for a reason, and that's the work on things that matter part that I really hope you guys will take away and think a little bit about what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and if it's something interesting that matters to the world. All right, let's do about 8 minutes of questions. Do we have a mic for that? Or if not, just shout it out in English or Danish. No questions. You guys shy?
There's a lot of discussion going on about contributing to PHP and how much...
Is there? Okay.
About the mailing lists and bullying. What's your take on that?
Right, so the question is the internals mailing list being unfriendly, I guess, and what my take is on that. If you pay attention to the sort of the less than polite replies that you see on the mailing list, it's very rarely from actual PHP contributors. There's a few people on the list that are very vocal, but if you go and look at any commits to the code from them, for the most part, you'll see zero. So it's a part of being an open source project. It's a part of being a completely open and transparent project. Anybody in the world can post to the internals list, which is a good thing. But that means that anybody in the world can post to the PHP internals list, which is a bad thing. Right? And we can't really have it both ways. Right? I think we've only ever banned 2 people from that list in the last 17 years or so, right? And so we do it in extreme cases, but I really hate to do it. I prefer to send some private emails trying to talk them down a little bit, because the whole idea of just excluding somebody just doesn't sit well with me. And there are times when we do reform some people and get them to be productive. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. So, yeah, So my take on it is it's sort of part of being an open source citizen. You're going to have the crazies. You're going to have the assholes. You're going to have to deal with people from different cultures. And it's just something you need to get used to. If you want to be part of this community, you need thick skin. You put your code out there for everyone to see, and the amount of criticism that flows in is amazing. Usually from lots of people who have never written anything useful in their lives, right? And I get more of it than most people, I think, right? You saw some of my fan mail there. And I get quite a lot like that. And it can be demoralizing sometimes, just like it may be to people who post to a mailing list and get some kind of idiotic reply back from someone. But you have to remember, that's just one individual out there that's doing it. It's not necessarily it's never a sort of a PHP project telling you that you're stupid and you should go away. It's some guy in a basement somewhere living with his mother that told you that, right? It's not something you really should sort of take personally. And yeah, I don't know how to fix it. We could moderate the list, I suppose, but that just sucks because then the turnaround just takes forever. Plus, I don't want to sit and moderate hundreds of posts every day. It means I have to read them all, which I don't. So yeah, I don't know how to fix it. I've tried posting some rules every now and then, sort of expectations and things. It never works. I don't know. It's part of being a large open source project, I think. Yes?
How is the Git migration affected both people involved in the workflow of itself?
So how has the Git migration affected the project? Personally, it slowed me down quite a bit. Because, simple Git simple single branch Git is nice and easy, and I've been using it for years. But when we have multiple branches, the way we're doing things, it's complicated. Merging the news file, for example, is a huge pain in the ass. There's a whole bunch of things that used to be really easy that are now really hard with Git. Hopefully we'll work through it and we'll all get comfortable with it eventually, and we'll see some of the benefits from pull requests coming in from GitHub and other places. But right now it's hard to see the benefit. I think we're all hoping that it'll come eventually when we all get better at it, but we'll see. was a hand over there, I thought. No? Yes? All right, so the question is that I'm here sort of begging people to help contribute to PHP, and there are huge companies out there that are using it. Why aren't they doing the work? Good question. Sometimes it feels a little bit silly that we have at any one point like less than 10 people working on core PHP issues in their spare time when they feel like it, when PHP runs so much of the web and there's so much money flowing through PHP, and it's a couple of volunteers somewhere doing all the work, right? It does feel wrong. And I wish some of these companies that relied heavily on PHP would set aside some skilled engineers to actually work on this stuff full time, or at the very least contribute back to things that they have fixed themselves in their internal version of PHP, which doesn't happen that often. So I would love to see that, but I'm not quite sure how to get them to do it. I think we've been doing too good a job with PHP that we fix things and they see it running fine, and there's nothing for them to do because we have these stupid open source guys that's doing all the work for us. We don't need to do anything, right? Let's just continue on. Maybe we should break everything. Maybe that will shock them out of their complacency and get them to help us out. I'm not sure. But if you are a company and you do use PHP, please consider contributing to PHP. And I don't mean money. I get tons of offers of financial assistance to the PHP project. I don't know what to do with money. That doesn't buy me anything, right? I mean, what am I supposed to do? Hire engineers and manage engineers? I don't want to do that. Instead of sending us money, send us your best engineer. That's never the case, though. And even if they do put some resources towards PHP, it's never their best engineer because their best engineer is working on something internal, some critical internal piece that they have. So we tend to get the not-so-good engineers sometimes. And that's not great either. Others? Yeah. All right, so the question is, how do we decide on which new features go in and when they go in? It used to be very ad hoc. It still is pretty ad hoc, but at least now we have a more structured approach to it through the RFC process. And you'll see once an RFC gets complete enough and has had enough discussion, it goes into a voting phase. And you'll see at the bottom of the accepted RFCs, you'll see votes, and you'll see which developers voted yay or nay on these things. And once a feature has enough yes votes, it goes into the next major version of PHP. So that's sort of the official process. That's a lot less ad hoc now because you basically just need to work on that RFC until you have enough votes, and then the feature goes in. And it's as simple as that. Sure. So, I mean, the way we encourage features like that is we discuss it on the mailing list, on the internals list. And the core guys that have been around for a long time do have a bit more weight. We still only have one vote, but we tend to be pretty good at swaying people. So if we really want the feature to go in, we make a nice, succinct argument on the mailing list saying why we think this feature is important, and then the votes will come for it, usually, at the very least, right? So that's the only real way I have of swaying things, is basically just convincing other people that this is a good thing. And if I can't convince other people that this is a good thing, I'm probably wrong, right? And that's for most features. If you can't get your fellow geeks to agree with you that this is a good thing, then chances are it isn't, right? Well, I haven't seen a vote for that that's gotten anywhere close to passing, so he was hinting at annotations. Others? I can't see, so shout if you're putting your hands up. No? Did I finish early? That's a first. Well, 3 minutes early. Okay, thank you very much. I'm around for like the next half hour, but then I'm running off to a plane to Moscow. So if you want to catch me, it should be soon. Thanks, guys.
DPC Radio is a production of iBuildings. The materials presented are copyright of the speakers. This episode is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 2.0 license. iBuildings is a full-service web development company specializing in PHP development. For more information on how we can help you with your next web project, visit our site at ibuildings.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll join us again for DPC Radio.